It looked like an angelic postcard from rural America, endless golden wheat fields, children playing in the sun, and the distant hum of summer. But within moments, something is terribly wrong. A frog explodes, a boy bursts into flames, and the sun never quite feels warm again. The Reflecting Skin isn't a horror film in the traditional sense. It's not about monsters, or murderers, or final girls. It's about dread that seeps into your bones like an incurable sickness. Directed by Philip Ridley, this 1,990 British-Canadian production slipped through the cracks of mainstream cinema, quietly embedding itself in the subconscious of anyone who ever saw it. Described as Terrence Malick by way of David Lynch, it's a story of childhood, decay, and the lies adults tell to survive, told through images so saturated, so surreal, that they feel hallucinatory. There's a version of this film most people have never seen, one with a different color palette, a different emotional temperature. Some say the film's original color grade was intentionally suppressed. Others claim it was simply a technical decision gone awry. But what if those golden hues weren't just aesthetic choices, but a way to hide something? This isn't just a cult film. It's a riddle wrapped in sunlight and soaked in blood. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about. The Reflecting Skin, 1,990. Fact 1. The sunlight wasn't real. The film is bathed in golden light, but not a single frame was shot at magic hour. In fact, most scenes were captured during harsh midday Sunday. Director Philip Ridley wanted the entire movie to look like an American Gothic painting dipped in honey. But the British Columbia location had notoriously flat, natural lighting, so the team used massive sheets of reflective material and bright gels to bounce light unnaturally across the fields. The crew nicknamed the setup the Angel Friar, because actors were drenched in heat and sweat while pretending to be serene. This overexposure wasn't an accident. It was designed to distort reality, to make the world feel almost edible, like a memory that's too sweet to be true. But that very look led some distributors to complain the film was too pretty to be horror and requested changes to the grade. The version that circulates today is a compromise, not Ridley's original vision. The real horror may not be what's on screen, but how far the light had to be manipulated to make the darkness seem believable. Fact 2. The vampire that wasn't. If you walk away from The Reflecting Skin convinced you just saw a vampire film, you're not alone. But Philip Ridley insists there are no vampires in his story. The character of Dolphin Blue, pale, mysterious, dressed in black, and living alone in a Gothic house, checks every box of a cinematic vampire. She drinks only liquids. She never goes out during the day. The townsfolk whisper about her, and when children begin to die, she becomes the obvious suspect. But Ridley later revealed that this was intentional misdirection. He wanted the audience to inhabit a child's paranoia, to see the world through young Seth's eyes, where myth bleeds into memory. Dolphin isn't a vampire, she's a grieving widow, stuck in her own loop of pain. The monster, if there is one, lives elsewhere. Or worse, maybe it never left the boy at all. Fact 3. The poster lied. The film's original US poster shows a screaming boy in black and white, his mouth wide open in terror, with a bat-like shadow cast behind him. It looks like a classic vampire flick, but it's pure misdirection. That image wasn't from the film at all. It was a staged photo, taken months after production wrapped, with a stand-in child actor and artificial lighting. Why? Because the US distributor panicked. Test audiences didn't understand the movie, and marketing teams believed that labeling it a horror film, even if it wasn't, would help it sell. Ironically, the poster created expectations that ruined the experience for many. Viewers went in anticipating gore and jump scares. Instead, they got meditations on grief, loneliness, and moral rot. The mismatch caused critics to dismiss it, and the film quickly vanished from theaters. Sometimes, the scariest thing isn't the film itself, it's how people try to sell it. Fact 4. The exploding frog almost didn't happen. One of the most jarring moments in The Reflecting Skin comes early. A group of boys inflates a frog with a straw, then throws it at Dolphin Blue's porch where it explodes in a burst of viscera. It's grotesque, it's absurd, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. But the scene was nearly cut. Animal rights concerns were raised almost immediately, especially during early UK screenings. The British Board of Film Classification, BBFC, demanded proof that no real animal was harmed. Ridley had to submit behind-the-scenes footage showing the frog was a rubber prop filled with fake blood and gelatin, rigged to burst on impact. The irony? The effect was so convincing that even some crew members thought it had been real. Rumors spread during production that a real frog had been used in an earlier take. Ridley always denied it, but the myth persists. In fact, It arguably helped fuel the film's sinister reputation. Whether real or not, the moment lingers a violent intrusion of cruelty into a world that pretends to be innocent. Fact 5. The soundtrack was lost for decades. Composer Nick Bickett created a score that felt like sunlight dissolving into madness, elegiac, eerie, and unsettlingly beautiful. But for nearly 25 years, the full soundtrack was unavailable anywhere. No official release accompanied the film's debut. The master tapes were stored in an unmarked box at a UK post-production facility that later went bankrupt. Only a few tracks were preserved on VHS rips, passed around by fans in horror forums. It wasn't until 2015 that the full soundtrack resurfaced thanks to BK himself, who found backups in his attic. The delay gave rise to odd fan theories. Some claimed the score was too emotional for horror. Others suggested its disappearance was deliberate to match the film's mythic tone. When it finally debuted on CD, one track stood out, Butterfly. Played during the film's most tender and most horrific scenes, it felt like a lullaby you shouldn't trust. Fact 6. Viggo Mortensen was a last-minute replacement. Yes, that Viggo Mortensen long before The Lord of the Rings, before Eastern Promises, before any stardom played the tragic older brother Cameron in The Reflecting Skin. But he almost wasn't in the film at all. The original actor cast for the role reportedly dropped out just 2 weeks before shooting his scenes. Ridley was devastated. He needed someone who could radiate quiet intensity, someone who could be both comforting and unknowable. A casting assistant suggested Mortensen, who had just wrapped a small indie project in Canada. Mortensen flew in, read the script overnight, and agreed on one condition: he would say as little as possible. He believed Cameron should feel like a man hollowed out by war, barely tethered to the real world. Ridley agreed and rewrote much of his dialogue to accommodate the change. The result? A performance built on silence, stares, and implication. One that haunts the film like smoke after a fire. Fact 7. The child actor was shielded from the script. Jeremy Cooper, who played young Seth Dove, was only 8 years old during filming, and he never read the full script. Philip Ridley made a controversial decision: to direct Jeremy scene by scene without giving him the context of the story. The goal was to preserve the childlike confusion and fear that permeates the film. Cooper was told the movie was a dream about growing up, and much of the darker material was withheld from him entirely. For example, he didn't know his character's brother was dying of radiation sickness. He didn't know what the word vampire meant in the context of the film. And during scenes of emotional breakdown, Ridley would whisper odd or surreal instructions to elicit natural reactions. "Pretend the sky is screaming," he once told him. The method sparked debates about ethics, but it worked. Cooper's performance feels raw, disconnected, and eerily unaffected, like a ghost who doesn't know he's dead. And to this day, Cooper has said he still doesn't fully understand what the film was about. Fact 8. The film was banned from a festival for being too beautiful. When The Reflecting Skin premiered at the Locarno Film Festival in 1990, it received a standing ovation and an immediate backlash. Festival organizers reportedly debated whether to include the film in the horror category. One jury member insisted it wasn't horror at all, but a poetic allegory. Another claimed it was exploitative art, using beauty to distract from nihilism. Ultimately, the film was withdrawn from a key horror sidebar not because it was too violent, but because it was too beautiful. The dissonance became a talking point. Could a film this visually stunning still be considered horror, or had it transcended genre? Years later, Ridley would say, "It's not horror. It's something pretending to be horror to protect itself from the truth. Whatever it is, festivals didn't know what to do with it, so they erased it instead." Fact 9. The angel prop was a rotten whale. One of the most unsettling images in the film is the bloated, decaying, fetus-like creature discovered in a barn, presented as a possible fallen angel. But what was it, really? According to the production team, the creature was constructed from a mixture of whale, meat, cow intestines, and latex tubing, baked under studio lights for days. The result was horrifying and absolutely putrid. The stench was so overwhelming that crew members had to rotate in shifts to avoid vomiting. Actors wore scented cotton under their noses during takes. The angel wasn't scripted to be so grotesque. Ridley had originally envisioned a dried husk, fragile and feathered, but when the art department presented the rotting version, he changed course. He said, "It should feel like something holy died trying to escape." That one prop, never explained, never mentioned again, became the film's most lingering symbol. An omen with no origin, no meaning, and no mercy. Fact 10. The burning scene was realer than it should have been. In the film's most shocking moment, a young boy is doused in gasoline and set on fire in broad daylight, in front of his screaming friends. It's quick, it's silent, and it feels too real. That's because it almost was. The stunt performer used for the scene had only done 2 previous fire stunts. The safety team prepared a gel barrier, fire retardant suit, and chemical timing system, but temperatures that day reached 98 degrees Fahrenheit, and the suit began to degrade under the heat. When the fire was lit, it spread faster than expected. The flames climbed past the suit's buffer zone in under 5 seconds. The performer stayed in character, writhing down the road, while Ridley screamed for the cameras to keep rolling. Only afterward did the team realize the actor had suffered second-degree burns on his neck. No lawsuits were filed, but Ridley later said he refused to watch the dailies for that scene. "It worked too well," he admitted. "We captured something primal, but we nearly paid too high a price." The horror wasn't just on screen. It lingered on the scorched grass where the boy had fallen. Fact 11. The film was once mistaken for a lost American classic. In 2001, a low-resolution rip of the reflecting skin began circulating online under the title The Dying Sunday. It had no credits, no time code, and only partial dialogue. Horror forums began speculating it was a banned American TV movie from the 1,970 seconds. It wasn't until a Reddit user reverse-searched a single frame the angel fetus in the barn that the film was correctly identified. The file had been copied from an obscure Japanese laserdisc with custom subtitles and an incorrect year, 1972. For weeks, the internet treated it like an unearthed artifact, an unknown relic from a forgotten age. Some even claimed the distorted VHS audio added to its dreamlike power. The irony? Ridley was never told. When asked about the lost version in an interview years later, he simply said, "Maybe that's how the film was meant to be seen. Fragmented, half-remembered, like a nightmare you can't place." Fact 12. The crows were drugged to sit still. Several scenes in the reflecting skin feature unnaturally. Still crows perched ominously in trees, watching like silent judges. They never flap, never caw, never move. That wasn't a visual effect. The birds were real and they were sedated. A now-defunct animal handler company provided the crows and administered a veterinary-approved sedative to make them docile. The birds were placed on hidden perches using transparent wires. Between takes, assistants used cooling sprays to calm their body temperatures under the lights. At the time, the practice was legal in Canada, but even in 1990, it drew quiet criticism. One animal welfare rep described the scenes as unnaturally eerie and possibly unethical. Today, that method would likely violate filming guidelines, but in the reflecting skin, it only deepened the unnatural stillness of its world. Nothing screams, nothing flees, everything just watches. Fact 13. The color grade was changed without the director's approval. The golden hues that define the reflecting skin, that sticky, syrupy glow coating every frame, may not have been Philip Ridley's choice. Originally, the film had a colder, bleaker palette. Test screenings in Europe used this version, and early reviews described it as ashen and dreamlike, but drained. But when the film was prepared for international distribution, particularly in North America, the producers pushed for a warmer grade to make it more marketable and visually distinct. The regrade exaggerated the yellows and reduced contrast, transforming the film into something almost pastoral. Ridley, away from the post-production suite during the changes, only saw the final result at a private screening. He reportedly walked out before it ended. Decades later, a restored Blu-ray claimed to reflect his intended vision, but fans debate whether that's true. Some argue the golden grade has become so iconic, it is the film now. But what if we've never actually seen the version Ridley wanted? Fact 14. The cast was told different stories. To maintain the film's ambiguity, Ridley employed a radical tactic. He gave different versions of the script to different actors. Lindsay Duncan, Dolphin Blue, was told the film was an allegory for eternal grief. Viggo Mortensen, Cameron, was directed to behave as if he were already dead. Jeremy Cooper, Seth, wasn't given any interpretation at all. As a result, characters seem to drift past each other like ghosts on separate planes. Their motivations don't always align, their reactions feel off-kilter, but it's deliberate. Ridley believed that truth in horror comes from dissonance, from characters not understanding each other, because they're not meant to. Some critics called it bad acting, others called it genius. But maybe the most unsettling thing is that none of the people on screen were ever in the same movie. Fact 15. The ending was inspired by a real event. The haunting final scene, Seth screaming under a blood-red sky as his brother floats lifeless in the water, feels mythic, almost biblical, but it was inspired by something much more mundane. Ridley once witnessed a drowning victim pulled from the Thames in London. The man's child was nearby, sobbing not with panic, but with confusion, as if waiting for someone to explain what had happened. The image stayed with him for years. He later said, "There's something terrible about children witnessing death, not because they understand it, but because they don't." That ambiguity became the film's core. Seth's scream isn't just grief, it's realization. The loss of innocence rendered in one terrible, endless howl. And the water? It reflects nothing. It only swallowed. Fact 16, it was almost a stage play. Long before it became a film, The Reflecting Skin existed as something else entirely, a one-act stage play. Philip Ridley originally conceived the story as a minimalist theatrical piece titled Seth's World. It featured only 3 characters, the boy, the mother, and Dolphin Blue, and took place entirely inside a decaying house. The script was rejected by multiple UK theaters for being too abstract, too cruel, and impossible to stage without traumatizing the audience. Ridley shelved the idea until he began working on a screenplay about childhood and decay in post-war America. Pieces from the failed play resurfaced, lines of dialogue, fragments of monologue, even the idea of a mysterious woman blamed for local deaths. The tone remained theatrical, stylized, heightened, and full of pauses that feel pregnant with meaning. That's why the film feels like a dream, performed on a proscenium stage. The wheat fields might as well be backdrops, and the shadows feel like intentional lighting cues. Theater rejected it, but cinema embraced the hallucination. Fact 17, it was secretly a response to the AIDS crisis. While The Reflecting Skin never mentions disease directly, several critics and scholars have interpreted the film as an allegory for the AIDS epidemic, and Ridley hasn't denied it. In interviews, he often danced around the question, but the imagery speaks volumes. An illness that comes without warning, spreads silently, targets the young and the innocent. A community that responds with whispers, suspicion, and exile. A brother whose body deteriorates from the inside out and a child left alone to make sense of it all. In one draft of the script, Cameron's illness was explicitly labeled as a sickness from overseas. That line was cut from the final film. Whether intentional or not, the reading has stuck. The Reflecting Skin became a requiem for a generation of unspoken deaths dressed in metaphor, draped in sunlight. Sometimes, what a film refuses to name speaks loudest of all. Fact 18. The film was a career killer. You might think that directing such a unique, haunting debut would launch Ridley into the cinematic stratosphere. It didn't. The Reflecting Skin was critically polarizing and commercially invisible. Distributors mishandled it, audiences misunderstood it, and awards bodies ignored it. Ridley found himself shut out from projects he had once been considered for. Even studios that liked the film labeled him difficult or too strange. He wouldn't direct another feature for almost a decade. The fallout extended to the cast. Lindsay Duncan struggled to land roles outside of period dramas. Jeremy Cooper, despite praise for his performance, left acting altogether. The film became a cult object, but for those involved, it was a kind of artistic black mark. Ridley once said, "You can make a beautiful film and be punished for it." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being autobiographical. Fact 19. It was nearly rated X. When The Reflecting Skin was submitted to the MPAA in 1990, the board responded with a rare verdict. The film would receive an X rating unless certain changes were made. The rating wasn't due to sex or violence, but tone. The MPAA cited the film's sustained atmosphere of child endangerment and grotesque imagery as grounds for restriction. Specifically, they objected to the scene involving Seth discovering the fetus-like creature, the boy's suicide by fire, and the implication of a romantic relationship between a grieving widow and a minor. Rather than fight the decision, the distributors opted to pull the film from theatrical release in the US entirely. It premiered on VHS with minimal marketing, in a cut identical to the original but without the rating seal. As a result, it was pushed into obscurity, bypassing the critical press cycle entirely. To this day, the film has never received a proper MPAA-rated theatrical run in the United States. It simply wasn't allowed to exist, not in any official, sanctioned form. Fact 20. The director still won't explain the title. Why The Reflecting Skin? What does it mean? Audiences have debated it for decades. Some believe it refers to literal imagery, the shimmer of water, the glow of sunburned children, the pale flesh of Dolphin Blue. Others see it as metaphor. Skin as the boundary between the inner and outer self, reflecting trauma, fear, or illusion. A few interpret it mystically, as if the skin in question belongs to an angel, or a corpse, or something in between. Ridley has been asked about the title in nearly every interview. He always gives the same response. It's the one thing I won't explain. If you understand it, you've probably misunderstood it. It's a provocation, a warning, or maybe an invitation, because in this film, what you see, what reflects back at you, is never the whole truth. Bonus fact: the wheat fields don't exist anymore. One of the most haunting elements in the reflecting skin isn't a monster or a murder. It's the landscape, those endless golden wheat fields that seem to stretch into eternity, shimmering like a dream about to curdle. But those fields are gone. The film was shot in rural Alberta, Canada, on private farmland that was sold and subdivided in the late 1990 seconds. The fields were paved over for residential development, and what remained was overtaken by industrial agriculture. The iconic barn? Demolished. The dirt road where Seth screams in the final scene? Now part of a concrete drainage system. Tourists still come, trying to find the locations. Some carry stills from the film. Others bring children of their own, hoping to share something strange and beautiful, only to find rows of identical houses, wind turbines, and gas stations. It's fitting, in a way. The reflecting skin was always about the end of innocence, about the moment the dream becomes a nightmare, and the world becomes unrecognizable. Now, even the dream's backdrop has vanished. The fields didn't just die. They were buried quietly, without ceremony, like so many forgotten stories. Which fact unsettled you the most? Was it the drugged crows, the lost color grade, or the forgotten fields that no longer exist? Tell us in the comments what you think the reflecting skin is really about, and what truth, if any, lies beneath its golden surface. And if there's another film that feels just as beautiful, broken, and buried, let us know what we should uncover next. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay curious. The light may be warm, but it never tells the whole story.